Now, I have identified at least 5 specific ways in which the fear of the Lord deters abuse. And all of these are laid forth very clearly in Scripture. Now, there's probably more than these 5, but these 5 are illustrated with very clear examples in Scripture, either in historical passages or in the epistles as a part of direct teaching. Now, the first case that we see, and I want to do this by presenting some basic characteristics of abusive people within the church community. Okay. And then I'll follow up with how the fear of the Lord would deter or keep us away from that kind of characteristic. So abusers within the Christian community are commonly domineering, and they commonly overburden others for their own gain. But those who fear the Lord are not going to commit abuse by overburdening others or by domineering them. And here we look back to the book of Nehemiah in chapter 5, verse 15, where it says that there had been governors in the land of Judah. Now, you remember, this is after the exile. The people are coming back to the land. There had been governors in the land of Judah who had preceded Nehemiah. And during their time governing, they had burdened the people by exacting heavy taxes. And it says that they even allowed their own servants to mistreat the people. But now Nehemiah presents a contrast. He said he did not do the same. He did not overburden the people with taxes. He did not mistreat them because he feared the Lord. In fact, in Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 9, it indicates that Nehemiah actually reprimanded the oppressive Jewish nobles and other officials who were exacting these heavy taxes from their fellow countrymen, and he exhorted them instead to walk in the fear of our God. And so here we see very clearly an abusive practice, and Nehemiah says, no, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to do that, because even though it seems to be readily practiced, I fear the Lord, and he has called me to something different than that. So that's one example. And, we probably see similarities to that in some of our ministry contexts today. We certainly know of cases where people have been mistreated by domineering leadership. But if that's happening, those leaders do not fear God the way they should. If someone is taking advantage of their position to mistreat and overburden others for their own well-being and gain, that is not God-fearing leadership. And those are people who, of course, should not be leaders because they're not biblically qualified if that is how they're behaving.
That was just, I really appreciate how direct and simple you just made that. So I hope everyone else does as well. And it's not just my New York coming out of like, all right, there we go. Just yes, exactly. And that is a nod back to how I opened this with you, Lee, of when I hear what these leaders are doing and that thought of they don't fear the Lord. It's so obviously missing.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. So, that's one common case. Let me present another, the second one here. Abusers tend to be corrupt and biased, or they show favoritism. Quite often, I've seen that favoritism is usually in the form of nepotism, but oftentimes they're corrupt, they're biased, they show favoritism in how they lead within their ministries, whether it's a church, parachurch ministry, it doesn't matter. But the reality is that those who rightly fear the Lord are not going to commit abuse by showing partiality or engaging in corruption like that. And we have another really good biblical example coming from 2 Chronicles chapter 19. And here, the text notes that King Jehoshaphat had ordered the judges and leaders of Judah to refrain from all favoritism and corruption, and to judge fairly, and specifically to judge fairly in the fear of the Lord. Basically, if you fear God, there is no room for this kind of corruption. There is no room for favoritism. And of course, that fairness in judgment and in how we handle all matters, that is really to be a reflection of the Lord's own righteous character. The Lord doesn't show partiality. The Lord doesn't engage in corruption. The Lord doesn't take bribes, it says in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17. The Lord's not like that. We're not to be like that either. And the fear of the Lord, King Jehoshaphat says, and so the text repeats, the fear of the Lord is a safeguard against any kind of corruption, against any type of favoritism or bias within ministry. If you fear the Lord, there's just no room for that. So there we see a second example. And, this is one of the things that honestly, I think shows up a lot. I hate to say, I think of some resources like the Roy's Report that Julie Roy's runs, and the Wartburg Watch, places like that. And it seems every day there is some new expose, and at the center of that is a lot of corruption. That
Yes.
should not be. And it's certainly not representative of people who fear the Lord, because people who rightly fear the Lord are not going to engage in patterns of corruption within their ministry.
Mm-hmm. Right. And too often we're seeing that it's been covered up, sometimes for literally decades before it's coming out. And so it's refreshing when we see some kind of mistake was made and somebody comes forward and owns it, and they remove themselves from their position, whether forever or for a period of time, depending on, the specifics of that.